Hello everyone. Today I'd like to take you on a journey. We'll begin in the year 2009. As a refresher, this is the year Nadia Suleiman gave birth to 8 babies at once. Susan Boyle won American Idol, and that was a thing. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince is in theaters. The Twilight saga is starting to explode, and Michael Jackson is dead. It was definitely a weird year, and that guy landed a plane in a river. So that's what 2009 had to offer. On July 13th of 2009, DeviantArt user Dally Roddle uploaded the first chapter of a distinct work of art titled Face the Strange. It could be compared to My Immortal, a more famous fan fiction. However, this one didn't last as long in terms of popularity and limelight. Face the Strange faded into obscurity a couple of weeks after it was brought to the attention of certain corners of the internet. However, it has merits that I feel that My Immortal doesn't have. We missed a lot with Face the Strange, and I'd like to discuss that today. Dally Roddle, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you have my genuine thanks. Face the Strange is one of my favorite things to go back and reread and just enjoy. It is funny, whether that was your intent or not. You've made a positive impact on people. And a quick disclaimer, I am going to try and edit out some of the slurs that are used just so they don't affect the story at all. So with that, here we go. Chapter 1. Dally was riding the Hogwarts Express to Hogwarts with her best friend, Edward Cullen. She had just found out she was a witch and a vampire with Edward, and now they were going to school to train and be better. "Edward, do you miss Bella?" I asked. "I? Grr, I don't want to talk about Bella," Edward said. "Oh, are you guys fighting?" "She's just being a cunt," he yelled. "She thinks I like you. Why would she say that?" Dally asked. Knock, knock. Suddenly there was a sound at the door of the trolley. "I'm going around with candy. Would you like to buy some?" came a voice from the door. The door slid open, and in came a boy with spiky black hair and black clothes, and he had his arm wrapped up. "My name is Hiei," he said. "I am selling these candies to pay for my trip to Hogwarts." He showed them a tray, and there were birdie spots and candy frogs with cards on them. Edward noticed that Dally was staring at Hiei and growled. "We aren't interested. Go away." "Oh, okay," said Hiei. "Wait, I would like to buy some buddy spots," Dally said, enthusiastically smiling. She reached for some and touched hands with Hiei. Edward gurred. That will be... Okay, well, it's free for you," Hiei said. He was flustered because he touched hands with Dally. He thought she was very cute. "Thank you," said Dally. Hiei left, and Dally began to eat the beans. "So do you like that guy?" Edward asked. "Of course, he gave me free food. He is very nice," Dally said happily. Dally, keep your standards high. Suddenly, they arrived at Hogwarts, and Un came from the train. They were greeted by a wizard with a long white bear and a pointy hat, and he said, "Come, students, follow me to the Great Hall, and we will eat and get you sorted." Dally and Edward got into a boat and went to the Great Hall with Dumbledore. They sat down at a table coincidentally right next to their friend from the ship, Hiei. Dally was also sitting next to a black and red hedgehog. The first time I read this, I didn't realize it was like the Sonic canon. I imagined just like a regular size hedgehog, and that stuck with me for the entire reading, so maybe it'll stick with you too. "My name is Shadow," said the hedgehog. Edward began to gurr again. "Why are you all talking to Dally?" "Calm down," said Dally. "He is my best friend. He gets a little territorial sometimes." "Oh, okay," said Shadow. "Aight," said Dumbledore. "I will now sort you into the hat." One by one, each of the students, and hedge mice, because there are some Sonic characters, came up to the sorting hat. It told poems for the houses. There's Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. "Edward Cullen," said the hat. "Slytherin." Edward put on a silver and green scarf and sat down at a table at the end. He winked at Dally as if to say, "Come to my house." Shadow. "Slytherin." Shadow put on a silver and green scarf and sat down next to Edward. "Gee, I hope she gets Slytherin," thought Shadow. Hiei. "Slytherin." Hiei put on a silver and green scarf and sat down next to Shadow and Edward. He could not stop grazing at Dally. Now it was Dally's turn. "Dally," called the hat. She beckoned, and so she went up. The boys did a drum roll with their feet. "Ravenclaw." Dally's face fell off. She could not believe it. The boys looked so disappointed. She sadly put on her black and blue scarf and sat at a table with a group of strangers. Lucky she found her friends Charlotte, Annie, and Megan at her table. "Hey guys, I didn't know you were witches." "Yes, we are. We just found out this summer," said Megan. "I can't believe we're in the same house." So there was good news after all. They began to head back to the homerooms when Hiei stopped Dally in the hall. "Listen, Dally, I want to tell you something," said Hiei. "I like you." "I like you too, Hiei," she said softly. Then he kissed her and their lips met like fire. "Okay, that's enough," said a voice. It was Professor Umbridge, the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. "Go to your rooms. I'll see you tomorrow," said Hiei, and he kissed her again. "I said enough, goddammit!" shouted the professor. "Bye," said Dally. They left, and from the darkness 2 eyes watched. It was Edward, and he was mad. Hope you're enjoying this so far. Chapter 2. Dally sat in the common room of Ravenpaw, sketching a picture of Hiei and thinking of his kiss. Suddenly she looks up at the fire in front of her and a face appeared. The fire turned blue like water, but it was fire and the eyes were yellow. "Hello," said the fire. "Mom," said Dally. Just then Mystique came out of the fire, and she was naked, but she didn't have nipples. "Now that you are a wizard, I can give you my powers," said Mystique. She handed me an orb, and suddenly the room turned colors. "Ah!" screamed Dally. She was in a lot of pain and suffrage. Then Mystique disappeared, leaving Dally with a belt with an X on it. She was now a mutant. Dally could feel a new rush hour of power in her organs. She tried it out and turned herself into a bat. "Well, I could already do that because I'm a vampire, lol," she thought to herself. So she tried it out again. And she turned into a demon chaos chow. A little spiky ball was above her head. "Oh my fucking Christ," she said. "I can turn into whatever I want with Mystique's powers." She pulled out her BlackBerry and texted Hiei, "Hiei, I am a chow," and he came right over. She turned back, though, because it would be creepy if they kissed, and he said it was really cool. He wanted the powers, too, so he asked the fire, "Can you give me the powers, too?" "No," Mystique showered. "You are not my daughter, and therefore I cannot pass the powers on to you. However, if you get married, you will be my son, and we can do it then." But suddenly Dally began to think of all the other guys in her life. There was Edward. He had Bella, but he said something about liking her on the trolley. And there was Shadow, who looked at her like, "I like you." And she liked Hiei, but she liked the others too. "I don't think so. I have cold toes," said Dally, and then she ran away crying. "No, you can't leave me here at the altar," shouted Hiei in upset. "Ha ha ha ha," laughed Mystique. "You will never fucking get to powers." How would you do that to someone who just got left at the altar? That's so cruel. And then she disappeared, and so did Hiei, because he's not supposed to be in Ravenclaw's dorm room. LOL, WTF was he thinking? Dally went quietly to herself when all of a sudden a blonde walked out of his class and approached her. "What's wrong, Dally?" he asked. "Who are you?" I asked. "I? Oh, my name is Draco Malfoy." "Are you okay?" Dally looked into Drake's eyes and saw that he cared. He was full of compassion like a snake. The boy held out a hand and pulled Dally up. "Do you want me to walk you to your class?" "I would love that," Dally said, battering her ashes. They began to walk down the hallway together when a blast came out from behind them. It was Edward. "Dally," he shouted, "what are you doing with all these boys?" Edward, it's really none of your business now. Let us go to the Great Hall," she snipped. "It is dangerous," he began to raise his voice. Just then Draco pulled out his wand, and him and the vampire got into a big fight. But Dumbledore came and broke it up. "That's it," he shouted. "You boys will come have a talk with me in my office." And they left. So Dally had to go to the Great Hall all by herself, but then Shadow came and joined her. "What's a pretty girl like you doing all by yourself in the Great Depression all alone?" he asked her. "Well, he is being an asshole," she said, and cried again. Shadow put his paw on her leg and massaged her, caressing. "It's okay," he said. "It's okay." Meanwhile, Hiei was upstairs punishing walls angrily. "Why did I hurt her?" he asked himself, and then he thought of a soluble. "I will win her back." Meanwhile, Edward and Draco were upstairs in Dumbledore's house. They were sitting on his bed because they were out of chairs. "What do you think punishment should be?" Dumbledore asked, pacing around. He was wearing a black t-shirt and ripped Hollister jeans that showed off his muscles. Edward gurred. His senses were tingling. That something was wrong. Suddenly, Dumbledore put his hands on both their legs and said, I can think of something. Oh my god, you... Draco screamed. He tried to run, but he could not. Chapter 3. Shadow and Dally were talking in the Great Hall when all of a sudden a cheetah ran in at warp speed, barreling through chairs and people in a frantic rush of hurry. Shadow, Dally, shouted the cheetah. Suddenly it turned back into Charlotte. She's an anemograph and can turn into a cheetah. Something is going on upstairs. Shadow put them all on his back because he's faster, even faster than the leopard, and they ran upstairs and busted down Dumble's door just in time to see him unzipping his jeans. No, Edward, Dally shouted. She loved Edward and would never see him get hurt. She ran at Dumbledore and headbutted him. He flew back into the wall and fell into his phoenix, and they both exploded into thin air. Fuck, we lost him, exclaimed Draco. We have to get that bastard fired from Hogwarts. The three of them made it downstairs to Professor McNaggle's orifice and demanded an interview. She opened the door to her chamber and said, "Come in, dearest Stuns. What can I ask you in?" "We need to get a certain pedophile fired from this place," said Harry. Harry? "He tried to rape some students, including me." "Oh, don't worry, I'll have it taken care of," she said, and bamfed them out. A week later, a blog was posted about it in the bathrooms that said, "A teacher has been fired for improper acting against a student. This teacher is Professor Umbridge." What? They all mounted in unicorns. They fired the wrong teacher. Wait, keep reading. It said more. There is a new teacher to be hired in place of this one, and his name is... Any guesses? Go ahead, I'll... Just give it a guess. Try. All right, you got it? All right. And his name is Jack Skeleton. Yay, Professor Skeleton will know what to do. Let's go to his class and tell him about that Dumbledore. They wailed over and came into his office. He was very skinny and had a skull for a head and no eyes but teeth on them. "Hello, students, what can I help you with?" he asserted. "Dumbledore is gay," blurted Edward. "Well, students, there is nothing wrong with being gay," he said. "I am bisexual myself." "Nobody tried to finger us," said Draco. He turned a little blue because he was embarrassed. Draco is straight and it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. "Oh, fuck," said Jack. They explained to him the whole story and he said, "Don't worry, I will take care of this. Just go to your rooms and sleep tonight. Until then, incest Dumbledore is not here, there are no rules." It's like how if the teacher doesn't show up within 15 minutes, you get to leave. Same thing. So they left and went to their rooms except for Dally and Hiei, who hung outside where the dorm room started. "Did you hear what Professor Skeleton said?" Hiei asked. "I know you're mad at me, but there are no rules and maybe I can make it up to you." "How would you do that?" asked Dally. Just then he pushed her against the Ravenclaw satellite and began to kiss her gastrically. She put her tongue in his mouth and felt his teeth. He cut his tongue on her fangs and the blood dripped down her chin. He was turned on by it and Dally suddenly felt something against her. "Hiei, is that your wand?" "No, that is my penis, Dally," he said. "OMG, you're so huge. You're like 6 inches, she shouted, gasping for breath. "No, I am 6 inches flaccid. Right now I have a boner, so I'm 10 inches, he said. Dally was at loss for words. She was a virgin and did not know about dicks, and it was her first time having a penis. "Let's go to your room," said Hiei. "I want to have sex with you." So he said the password and they went into Ravenclaw and went to Dally's bedroom. A couple of Ravenclaws. "Dally, what is he doing here?" But she turned Hiei into a broom with her powers as a mutant, so they didn't notice anymore. Then she unturned him back into a Hiei when they got into her bed. They started kissing and taking their clothes off. "Do you have a birth control?" asked Dally when he started to put it in. "No, I didn't think to bring some," he said, frowning, but he kept doing it. "Hiei, I don't want to have a baby. You can get pregnant even from your first time," she said, kissing him and moaning as he went faster. "It will be okay. You can just use your power to turn my cum into water and then there won't be babies," he said as he started to titty fuck her. Her boobs were so huge they could wrap them around his wiener like bumblebees. "That sounds like a good idea," she said as he splurted on her neck, then flipped her over and started rubbing himself on her back. "I can also use my powers to turn stuff into kinky sex toys." So they continued, but just from the first chapter 1, Edward was watching from the darkness. He had used his vampire powers to turn into a bat, and they didn't notice him fly in. He was angry. He was tumors. He was so mad at both of them that he used his wizard powers to turn the water back into cum. He would get his revenge. And with that, we will pause. Thank you so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this, comment or like or something so I know to keep going. If you hated it, let me know, so I'll stop. Thanks.